Now it's time to look at the small forwards available on this year's NBA free agent market. Now, there are definitely some big names, and no name bigger than the best player in the NBA, the real 2015 NBA Finals most valuable player in LeBron James. Now, is usually the case whenever a player, the caliber, the talents of the star power of a LeBron James would enter the free agent market, it would send the world ablaze. It would send the internet into breakdown mode because everybody would be talking about what's going to happen, where is he going to go. We saw this happen in 2010 in the lead up to the decision. We saw this again in 2014 with the lead up to the decision number 2. Well, in this particular case, though, I don't think anybody believes that LeBron James is going anywhere but staying right in Cleveland, and I don't think anybody believes that he's even going to talk to any other teams, nor have we heard any reports of him talking to any other teams. One thing I will give LeBron is that he's incredibly smart in the way he goes about conducting his business from a business standpoint in terms of negotiating his contracts. He was smart enough when he signed with Cleveland to get a deal that had an opt-out after 1 year, so that way he could get himself another deal that'll have an opt-out after 1 year with more money, so that way when that salary cap again is due to rise dramatically with the increase of television revenues coming in before the 2016-2017 season, LeBron is going to be able to cash in a big, big way. This guy knows it. This guy gets it. This guy understands how the game is played, and I applaud him for that. And when you are the best player in the game, why should you take any less money than you absolutely have to? He's earned the right to do whatever the hell he wants to do. It's very smart in his standpoint, too, because you also look at this from a team-building standpoint. LeBron James is obviously a championship chaser. And at the end of the day, he knows that with his type of max money on the books, along with the Cavs already having Kyrie Irving's max money on the books, that it could be very difficult for a team like the Cavaliers to be able to build a championship team around him. So LeBron James understands that he could sit there and wait it out, knowing that the Cavs will have the ability to give him max money. And he could sit there and wait and allow the Cavaliers to re-sign other players like Tristan Thompson, and perhaps Kevin Love as well, and then he can re-sign after the fact. Great move by LeBron James. So even though he's a free agent in theory, nobody's talking about him going anywhere, and frankly, he'd be foolish at this stage to go anywhere. He did a lot of good for himself in this past NBA season, going back to Cleveland, and in particular performing the way he did in the NBA Finals. Going to another team would be a PR disaster, and there wouldn't be a whole lot of defending it. In terms of Kawhi Leonard, who is clearly to be the number 2 small forward on the free agent market, you're talking about a guy that is one of the better two-way players in all of the NBA, who showed his real wares in the 2014 NBA Finals when he was named the Finals most valuable player. Here's the guy that's going to be the future of the San Antonio Spurs. He is going to be the guy long-term that organization is built around. And at 24 years of age, still not even in the peak of his career, I don't think anybody believes he's going to end up anywhere other than San Antonio. He's the perfect player for Greg Popovich. Greg Popovich is the perfect coach for him. San Antonio is the perfect place for Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard is the perfect superstar for San Antonio. They can give him more money than anybody else, and they will do so. They will give him a max deal, and he's not going to bat an eye. He's going to get paid to play in San Antonio. So while he's a free agent, is he really a free agent? Is anybody going to bother to even make him an offer? Why? Because you know San Antonio is going to match it. And we get to where the class starts to get interesting. We go to DeMarre Carroll, the former swing man from Missouri, had a really, really impressive year in 2014-2015. After years of kind of waiting for him to really find his niche in the NBA, a guy goes from having to work out for teams in the offseason in order to get a free agent deal to now having a big-time season with the Atlanta Hawks where he's going to make, perhaps $14, $15 million per season. And it'll be very interesting to see what happens with DeMarre Carroll, even though I don't really think there are going to be a whole lot of suitors out there for him. I think the Detroit Pistons, even with the selection of Stanley Johnson, 8th overall, are going to be players for Carroll. They might come sniffing. They might even make him a contract offer. Maybe there will be another surprise team in there. But I think the Atlanta Falcons are going to value what DeMarre Carroll brings on both sides of the floor. They're going to look at his systematic fit and view him as the perfect type of Atlanta Hawks type of guy. Look at the fact that he could maybe even get better next season and going forward. But most importantly of all, provide some security and flexibility just in case they're not able to retain a guy like Paul Millsap, who is also hitting free agency, that continuity is going to be a big thing for the Atlanta Hawks. For Coach Mike Budenholzer, especially now that he has more personnel power, for somebody that came from the Greg Popovich tree, that came from the San Antonio Spurs system, he understands one of the key things to success for the San Antonio Spurs consistently for the past decade and a half has been continuity. They just don't get rid of stars. Their big players, their best players stay, and then you build around them. There's a continuity to the players there, a continuity to the fit, a continuity to the scheme. And I'd be very surprised if the Atlanta Hawks allow DeMarre Carroll to leave in free agency. I'd really be surprised if he did. He'll get some sniffs, he'll get some offers, but I think his value to Atlanta is greater than it would be to any other team, and I think Atlanta will be smart enough to realize that as well. I look at Tobias Harris, though, and I think this is a guy that could be on the move. You are talking about a guy, I believe he averaged about 17 points a game last year for a not very good Orlando team, but a young team that is improving, is getting better, that plays with a hard-nosed type of style, and Tobias Harris fits that style in some ways. You're talking about an athletic wing that's 6'9", that's not even 23 years of age yet. So you're talking about a guy who still has a long ways to go, perhaps, before he even reaches the peak of who he could be as an NBA player. Is he an all-star caliber player? Maybe, maybe not. Only time will tell. At the worst case scenario, Tobias Harris is an outstanding number 3 option on a championship team, or a really damn good number 2 option on a pretty good team. And as a result, I expect teams to be sniffing around. And a team like Detroit, again, even with the selection of Stanley Johnson, that may not preclude them from going after Tobias Harris. A team like Boston, I think, with all the emphasis they've placed on the backcourt and their love of the point guards like the Isaiah Thomases and the Marcus Smarts and those type of guys, the drafting of Terry Rozier, you look at the other guards they have in place like an Avery Bradley, they need something up front. And a guy like Tobias Harris could bring them a lot on the wing, something that they really, really need, some size and playmaking ability at the 3. The Boston Celtics have plenty of salary cap space to go make a big-time move for somebody like this. And while he might not be the star that everybody is talking about, a guy like Tobias Harris could end up getting a contract close to anywhere between $14 to $15 million per season. And that might get to a point in time for the Orlando Magic where that's just too rich for their blood, especially with the drafting of Hezonja, number 5. They might look at it. They've got Aaron Gordon, one of their first-round picks from last year. They might think he could take on a bigger role. They might feel like it's just too rich to bring back a Tobias Harris for that money for that long of a time. And while a lot of people might scratch their heads and say Tobias Harris getting that much money, for a team like the Boston Celtics, it could end up being, frankly, a real bargain because he could, in that situation, potentially develop into an all-star. Again, if you're going to gamble on somebody and paying them a lot of money, a 22-year-old wing that is already averaging 17 points per game is a pretty good place to start. I look at Khris Middleton of the Bucks, former second-round pick, good story. That really had some nice moments for the Bucks under Jason Kidd this 2014-2015 season. While I'm sure there's some interest around the league, I don't think the Milwaukee Bucks are going to let him get anywhere, and I expect him to re-sign with the team. Similar to Corey Brewer of the Houston Rockets, he was brought in, and I thought he did very well for them. Frankly, it was the best I've ever seen Corey Brewer play from an all-around standpoint. I think that system that Houston runs is a really good fit for him. Very open, very up and down the floor. I think Kevin McHale is a good type of coach for a guy like Corey Brewer. And I look at the Houston Rockets. They got to the Western Conference Finals, and while I don't think they're a championship contending team, continuity helps you get to that point. And keeping a guy like Corey Brewer has to be very important. Similar to the Chicago Bulls keeping Mike Dunleavy. Now, to me, they need to play him a little less. I thought Thibodeau played him too much, and that wore him down a little bit, especially late in the season and in the playoffs. But Dunleavy at times showed flashes where he could still be a valuable player, and he's a nice role player to have, either in the starting lineup or coming off the bench. And even entering his age 35 season this upcoming year, I would expect the Bulls to do whatever they can to try and retain him, even if it eventually takes them into luxury tax territory. The one other free agent small forward to really keep your eye on is Paul Pierce at age 37. Has he had enough? Is it time for him to retire? Is he ready to retire? Or is he going to come back? He opted out of his contract with Washington, but that might not necessarily preclude him from coming back to the Wizards. There could be other suitors, though. Doc Rivers is out there with the Clippers, and you look at that situation, and Paul Pierce would bring some much-needed championship experience and veteran leadership to a Clippers locker room that desperately needs it. Or he could have the desire to go back where it all started in Boston and play with that young team and bring some championship experience and veteran leadership to a team that surprised many when they made it to the playoffs this past season. Paul Pierce, I'll be keeping an eye on too. I thought he was a really good acquisition by the Washington Wizards this past offseason. I thought he brought pretty much everything to the table that the Wizards could have expected or hoped for, and it would be detrimental to them, frankly, even with getting a guy like a Kelly Oubre in the draft and having the development of an Otto Porter. I still think it would be somewhat detrimental if they lost a Paul Pierce via free agency, although it looks like they very well could. So you look at this small forward class. James isn't going anywhere. Kawhi's not going anywhere. I really don't think DeMarre Carroll's going anywhere. Khris Middleton, Corey Brewer, Mike Dunleavy even, I don't really think they're going anywhere. But the guy to really watch in this small forward class, to me, is Tobias Harris. He's going to get paid. He's going to get paid a lot. And he could end up in a good situation that allows him to eventually develop potentially into a borderline all-star type of player.